I used to share a lot with healthcare teams and such because it helped with morale and things like that. But it's also based on a book of a former friend of mine. We became friends, but she was really an international author and teacher, Debbie Ford. And so the questions come from Debbie Ford. So I have a file with a lot of copies if you want a copy of these questions, because I carry them with me every day. And I needed them lately because we never know what life's going to throw at us, right? And so last 3.5 weeks, I've lost two friends. Ironically, both their names are Chris. One was a gal who I worked on Dreamtime TV show. It was her vision. And we worked a lot of hours together, almost a year and a half, funding and interviewing people. And she lives in Columbus and died at 83. The other, and both were I was close to back in the day. And the other tragically was murdered here in the woods of Zionsville. And I've been on the phone with Lori a lot during this time, her sister, and it just brought back a lot of memories. And as a guy who tends to work not necessarily in a joy-filled job, hospice, you work hard at getting your daydreams and finding the positive where you can and bringing that light in where you can. And I found that Debbie's questions were just amazing. Her first book, she started as a secretary, and then I'll jump right into this, at the Chopra Center. And no background, no education to speak of. And she was so good that they had her teach a local class or two. She was so good that she wrote this book called The Dark Side of the Light Chasers. It became a New York Times bestseller. She started teaching all over the world. I finally met her in person when she came to Borders Bookstore. This dates the story, on a book tour of this book. She had already been on the show, and we interviewed her about this. But I found the questions so helpful and so powerful. So I want to get in those because it's helped me understand some things, how I can, by choices, control how I feel, no matter what situation I'm in. And sometimes, maybe for many of us, just the doldrums, life looking, it's kind of like bland. And I tell you what, folks, I've shared this in another message about the dying, what the dying teach me about living. And that is, I want to go big. I want to go out big because I don't want to get that disease called adultitis, because it's so easy for all of us to get that way and just get a little bit stuffy. So I thought, when I got permission about creativity, I thought, well, I'll play this video here because I think it was really that good, because I never, ever, ever want to stop dreaming myself. The older I get, the more dreams I want to have, and then just go for them. But here's what I've learned in my life, and in the various work I've done, including the counseling and coaching. I've learned that regardless of our faith, there is a wick within us that is waiting to become the light of our soul. We all have it within us. When this inner flame burns brightly, you feel a magnificent awakening in your life. Each of us has this internal flame, and I call it a life force. You could call it spirit if you want, depending on where you're at. And each choice we make either adds to this life force, making it stronger, igniting and feeding our flame, or diminishes the force, dampening our internal flame, reducing its power. When our internal fire roars, we feel strong, we feel powerful, we feel confident, we have the courage, we have the strength to speak truthfully and ask for what we need. A strong flame propels us into a higher state of consciousness where self-love and emotional freedom reside. I remember years ago when my family and I lived in Brownsburg, my adult kids were young, and the furnace went out, and it was a very cold winter, and I knew nothing about furnaces. And the kids were starting to come into the bedroom. Dad, we're cold, we're cold. I said, oh no, the furnace went out. Called the guy. The guy, fortunately, came within an hour and a half. Kids were all dressed up really warm. Come to find out, the pilot light went out. Well, I didn't know anything about a pilot light at the time, so he ignited the pilot light. I still remember that because here we are, all of us walking by this furnace for several years since we had that house, not even thinking about the furnace, let alone a pilot light, but it went out. It goes on. They start feeling warm. The kids are jumping up and down. The pilot light, the pilot light, the pilot light is on. And I walk over to the wall, and here's the thing I remember the most. I turned the thermostat, and I heard it go whoosh. I pray that we all have more of a whoosh in our life than just a flicker, because you can tell in people. Now, the reason I've taught this a lot with healthcare, because in healthcare, same thing. can be a downer. Nursing homes, there's always stress with lack of job, lack of staff and things like that. But I thought about that in that regard too. But I think about it every day in my life. Richard, where's your internal flame today? Is it heading to a whoosh? Is it even middle? Or are you feeling a flicker? And I've learned through the help of Debbie that a lot of times it's because of the choices I made. Now, I had a professor when I was in grad school at University of Illinois in counseling, and she said, every day is filled with choices, and every choice you make, there's a price to pay. I've never forgotten that. As simple as that sounds, but as profound as that sounds. So when our flames are low, think about this. When our flames are low, we're vulnerable. We're weak. We feel scared and apprehensive. We worry. There's self-doubt. When our flames have not been cared for and fed, we hunger for things outside of ourselves to make us feel better. And I think we've all learned along the way that all the love you ever need is already inside you. You have that love inside you. You have that light inside you. But so many times we're like seeking missiles. We're seeking outside of ourselves everything, and we never fully get satisfied. The Buddhists call it the hungry ghost. Big belly, small mouth, can never get enough in to fully satisfy it. Well, I think there's some similarities in here. And so I realized I jotted down a lot of choices. And so here are some of the choices that can dim your light. Being around people that criticize you and can't see your magnificence. Shoulds, have tos, trying to get others' approval, lying to yourself, gossiping, being late, judging others, judging ourselves, even worse, not enjoying what you have, always wanting more, the eternal cravings that I talked about, looking for others to make you happy. How many times have you had a fight with a friend? You made me angry. You made me sad. Nobody makes you angry. Nobody makes you sad. Not really. It just pricked in something of a wound you already had, and you reacted that way. It wasn't them. And so we give away our power a lot too. Withholding success from yourself, ignoring your deepest desires, overspending, overeating, trying to be someone you're not, withholding love from your family, ignoring your inner voice. Those are all things that if you're not careful, day after day, week after week, month after month, you're going to wake up. And I know you got a flicker because when you woke up this morning, there wasn't a chalk line around your body. So you know it's there. But if you're looking for more, maybe try thinking about the choices you're making, which also influences the attitudes and the feelings that we can have. And it doesn't require another person to do that. Now, choices that make your fire at full roar. At least these are the ones that I've seen, and there might be more. Taking time for yourself. Those of you who are very, very busy and overcommitted, how many times do you take time for yourself? Maybe even if it means just getting in a car and driving for an hour somewhere and then coming back if you got little kids or little grandkids you're taking care of. Taking time for yourself, spending time with those you love, noticing what you've done well. Stop noticing the things you don't do well. Notice the things you do well. Take care of your body, rest, play. Play. I will overemphasize that purposely because there's a little boy and a little girl and everybody's body's in here and that little child is dying to come out. I have seen stuffy grown men when I go with them at Colts games, all of a sudden, to my shock and surprise, act like kids. And I want to say, why don't you do that during the day, during the week? It's okay to do that. So, play. Spending money wisely, planning for the future, hanging out with people who inspire you, honoring your word, that will raise the flame inside you. Being compassionate, being intimate with those you love, doing what you love. When I used to do a lot of life purpose coaching, I'd have a lot of clients who were sacrificing their passion for a paycheck. They hated their job. But they kept doing it because they didn't think they really had a choice. Going after your dreams, dancing, moving your body. That's what I call dancing, just moving your body to the music. Forgiving, being present for your children or grandchildren, looking for what's right. So here are the questions that I go through. There's 2 or 3 that I probably use a lot, but I want to just run through these quickly in the time that we have. And the reason why I think this is important, I think it was George Bernard Shaw. I have a couple quotes of his that I love. But he said, some men see things as they are and ask why. I dream things that never were and ask, why not? I remember Senator Robert Kennedy used to use that quote a lot in his messages back in the day. And that's still an important quote to me. Why not? Why do we always stare at the negative? Now, I remember another talk, I said, don't stare at the dark. Look at the light. We tend to get fascinated with the dark, but just notice it and move on with all the news we have going on. So here are the questions. Will this choice that you're about to make, will this choice propel me towards an inspiring future, or will it keep me stuck in the past? Now, I've used that question sometimes with people who are wanting to make a career change. This can be in any conceivable thing, relationships, career, service. If you're trying to make a decision because you got a full plate, this is a good question to ask. Will this choice I'm about to make propel me towards an inspiring future? If it does, I would say, well, now let's get a plan together and let's go for that. Or will it keep me stuck in the past? Because if it keeps you stuck in the past, don't blame anybody else but yourself. Question number 2, will this choice bring me long-term fulfillment, or will it bring me short-term gratification? Now, Richard uses this a lot when he's trying to lose some weight. I used to really be addicted to butter pecan ice cream. I blame my grandmother for that. See, I'm already blaming somebody outside myself. So what I would do, I'd play a trick. I'd go, like at Kroger, it has these little tiny containers of ice cream, and I think, well, I'll get one of those. And then I'll just take a spoonful out and it'll last a long time. It's not much ice cream because I always check the calories too. Well, I noticed that really wasn't working because I bought it earlier that day. It was at night and I don't know, lunch, somehow it was half empty. And I thought about that, pulled out, because I have the list with me in my planner. I said, all right, Richard, playfully, I said, this playfully, will this choice bring me long-term fulfillment? In other words, wanting to lose a certain amount of weight that I wanted to learn, or will it bring me short-term gratification? Now, in that particular instance, I chose short-term gratification. And you know what? By doing that, the ice cream and I were one. We had an Eckhart Tolle moment with no guilt because I chose that gratification as compared to, no, I'm going to put it away, long-term fulfillment. Here's another good one. Number 3, am I standing in my power in this choice you're about to make, or you're going to be making a choice? Am I standing in my power, or am I trying to please another? How many of us have gotten into the yes habit? Yes, yes. Okay. Will you do that? Yes. And we literally give ourselves away. Don Miguel Ruiz used to say in his book, The Four Agreements, that probably now, because most of you are very knowledgeable, usually Unitarians and Episcopalians are very knowledgeable. But given what you know about yourself, probably 80% is not who you are because we made these unconscious agreements going through life. So, am I standing in my power in this agreement, or am I trying to please another, maybe to avoid conflict, what have you? Question number 4. In this situation, am I looking for what's right, or am I looking for what's wrong? That's a big one. Because I don't know about you, but when you work with teams like I do, it's amazing how people seem to be wired for negativity instead of being positive. I don't think we are. I think they learn it along the way. But what about the things we've done right? What about the things the company has done right? What about the things the church has done right? Instead of always pointing out the things we've done wrong. We get into a habit of that, and that can really take that flame all the way down, especially if we're doing it to ourselves. Because you probably know this, but I've learned also through all the guests I used to interview, I'd ask them this question at the end after we taped, because it did nothing to do with their book. I said, what do you think is the greatest need in the world? I mean, the environment, racism, all these things. And they would always say the lack of self-love. we're not loving ourselves enough. So that's a good question. Am I looking for what's right or am I looking for what's wrong? 5, will this choice add to my life force or will it rob me of my energy? People who tend to overcommit, you're being robbed of your energy. I have another handout I worked with my clients where you start charting in this because it has it in there. You start checking off the things that fuel you and all the things you probably have done or had or whatever that deplete you of energy. Then you look at it and say, oh, no wonder I'm tired. It's as simple as that. So much of this is so simple. We all have read the books. We all have been to the seminars. We all have heard the pastors that come in and talk. Sometimes the messages are somewhat similar. But as many people smarter than I have said, I remember Leo Buscaglia used to always say this, why aren't you doing it? So another one, this is a great one. Will I use this situation as a catalyst to grow? Now, this is when Richard has made a mistake sometimes. Will I use this situation as a catalyst to grow and evolve, or will I use it to beat myself up? So before we get into the feeling mode, let's check our thoughts by asking these questions. Well, yeah, good reminder. It's a good reminder. I need to ask myself that. I'm going to choose every moment to see it as a way of growing and evolving, not making that same mistake. Question number 7, does this choice empower me or does it disempower me? Because it needs to power you. Dream no small dreams, Goethe said, for they have no power to move the hearts of people. I am convinced more than ever before, today, people's hearts need to be moved. We need more inspiring people, inspiring youth, inspiring businesses, inspiring churches where people come and are fueled up and not depleted. Is this an act of self-love or is it an act of self-sabotage? 9, is this an act of faith or is it an act of fear? I asked that question with a friend just last week because he was making a move. It was kind of scary. And I said, hey, there's no judgment either way, first of all. But ask this question to yourself quietly. Is this an act of faith that I want to do, or is it an act of fear? And then finally, am I choosing from my divinity or from my humanity? Now, I can say since 2006, I've been using these questions. Probably 3 or 4, a lot more than maybe some of the others. But they have been worth their weight in gold. Again, nothing deep or profound, but tools and resources that we have available to us that can make a profound difference in your life. And if it makes a difference in your life collectively, it makes a difference in the community of faith as well, or just as it does in a business or an office and what have you. I want to close with another Shaw quote. I love George Bernard Shaw because he lived to be, what, to 104, something like that. I read somewhere he was in his 90s and he was sawing a limb off a tree and he was in the tree and fell out of the tree. That's the kind of guy I want to be. Maybe not that stupid, but to have that kind of honoriness like he had, this is one of my favorite ones. And I'll end with this. This is the true joy in life, the being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, the being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live it, it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die. For the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle for me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. And I just want to say that the 2 Chris's that I knew about this message. I had them read the book. They signed off on it, and they would have signed off on that song too. So blessed be. Thank you so much.